Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify before the California Reparations Task Force. This body has a historic opportunity to create a national model for reparations, and I am honored to play a small role in its deliberations. I'm currently the executive director of the Children's Defense Fund in the California office. The Children's Defense Fund fights for the largest, most diverse generation in America, the 73 million children and youth under the age of 18, and the 30 million young adults under the age of 25, with particular attention to those living in poverty and Black youth. We know that the legacy of enslavement drives child poverty, especially in California, where we have among the highest poverty levels in the nation. Black people have been systematically deprived of housing, quality of health care, ample nutritious food, equitable education, safe neighborhoods, and access to resources and opportunities. I'm here today to testify about the expansive harm of enslavement, which includes the broad range of harmful legal regimes that grow out of it, including the Black Codes, convict leasing, Jim Crow laws, the drug war, and the overall disproportionate treatment of Black people in the criminal legal system. My testimony today largely draws from my experience as the executive director of Arch City Defenders from 2009 to 2017. Arch City Defenders is a holistic legal advocacy organization combating the criminalization of poverty and state violence, especially among Black people and poor people in the St. Louis region. We provided direct legal representation in civil and criminal cases of people experiencing homelessness and helped them obtain the social services critical to obtaining and maintaining housing. Our clients face mostly low-level municipal charges, ranging from things like expired license plates to manner of walking, all of which were designed to police race and poverty in the series of small towns in the region. The most famous of these apartheid-like legal regimes is, of course, Ferguson, Missouri, which operated in relative obscurity until the murder of Mike Brown on August 9th, 2014, and the subsequent Ferguson uprising. Enslavement's past and present merged in at least two important ways during the uprising. The murder of Mike Brown by a white Ferguson cop echoed the dehumanization of Black people inherent to enslavement. And St. Louis's racist, predatory legal regime reflected the long history of white supremacy enforced through a modern-day manifestation of debt peonage, Jim Crow, and Black Codes. Let's start with the current picture that Dr. Barco has given, but I'm going to reiterate some of it here, of the U.S. mass system of human caging. The United States has 1,566 state prisons, 102 federal prisons, 2,850 jails, 1,510 child caging facilities, 186 immigration caging centers, and 82 Indian country jails. We currently incarcerate 1.9 million people, 615,000 of whom are locked in a cage right now because of poverty and race, who have not been convicted of a crime. Because jail contributes so profoundly to the perpetuation of poverty, the cost associated with this level of jailing are estimated to be as high as $140 billion per year. If you add in probation and parole, the total number of human beings under carceral control in the United States is nearly 6 million. We are far and away the world's leader in human caging, imprisoning our citizens significantly more than countries like China, Russia, and Iran. 1 in 3 Black men will be incarcerated during their lifetime. Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at rates nearly 5 times that of white Americans. 1 in 81 Black adults is serving prison time right now. In California, the disparity between imprisonment of Black people and white people is 9-1. Overall, the United States incarcerates Black men at a rate 6 times that of South Africa at the height of apartheid. Ferguson itself is emblematic of the outgrowth of enslavement, although it was initially described as a microcosm of the modern inequality and injustice in the United States. While the population of the city of Ferguson was 67% Black, 85% of all vehicle stops, 93% of all arrests, 88% of all use of force cases, and 92% of all warrant issues involved Black people. In St. Louis County, where Ferguson was located, Ferguson was simply one of dozens of virtually identical racist, predatory, local criminalized legal systems, all of which routinely and disproportionately stopped, charged, fined, arrested, and caged poor and Black people. St. Louis's Kafkaesque debtors prison network resulted in an astonishing but banal reality on the day Mike Brown was murdered. There were 700,000 active warrants for arrest in the St. Louis region, which only has 1.2 million people. Let that sink in for a moment. That's roughly 1 out of every 2 people in St. Louis had a warrant for their arrest. In Ferguson alone, there were 32,000 active arrest warrants in a city of 21,000 people. Secondly, Mike Brown's killing is situated within a long history of cops and white people killing unarmed Black people. These killings follow predictable patterns, the most damning of which is the inevitable dehumanization of the victim. Depicting Black people as inhuman was a central premise justifying enslavement and the white supremacist fear-mongering that followed Reconstruction. The fear of free Black people gaining economic and political power quickly translated into the depictions we've seen ever since. Black men were depicted as brutes, stock figure of white supremacist rhetoric in the lynching era. They were described as beasts that could withstand the worst kinds of punishment. You remember the images from headlines, stories of super predators, wilding, fear-mongering concerns about Willie Horton. But these stories are never so prominent as when cops brutalize Black people. Like Freddie Gray and Trayvon Martin, Rodney King was described as someone to fear, a monster, a Tasmanian devil, a man with, quote, Hulk-like strength. When Darren Wilson called Mike Brown a demon, he drew on this history. He called Mike Brown a person with superhuman strength who somehow grew stronger as Wilson tried to kill him. Wilson, like so many murderers of Black people, justified his actions by directly treading on the dehumanizing stereotypes emerging from enslavement. When people took to the streets after Mike Brown's murder during the longest sustained protests in U.S. history, they weren't simply protesting police violence against unarmed Black people. They were protesting a system. 91 cities with 81 courts and 67 police departments policing Black life and generating a collective $50 million from their oppression. They protested being locked in a cage because they were too poor to make a payment. They didn't have access to medication. Black women with children protested being stolen from their children because they didn't have $350 to buy their freedom. Tens of thousands of people were jailed because of their race and poverty, all while being asked to believe that this was actually about public safety instead of race and social control. These practices in Ferguson and throughout the country represent the largely uninterrupted collaboration between cops, courts, and local governments, not only to oppress Black people and poor people, but also to profit from that collaboration. Starting with legalized slavery that built the United States of America, continuing on to the Black Codes, followed by the debt peonage that replaced it, and the further criminalization of Black life and poverty. Whether it is the creation and selective enforcement of trespassing, vagrancy, panhandling laws, or the disparities in traffic stops and mandatory sentencing for drug cases, the legal system has reflected the most pernicious strains of American racism. And this system exists throughout the country. According to the Children's Defense Fund's 2021 report on the state of children in the U.S., a disproportionate number of Black children are incarcerated in the juvenile justice and or adult criminal legal systems, placing them at risk of physical and psychological harm. 530,000 children were arrested in the U.S., and a child or teen was arrested every 59 seconds. Black children were 2.4 times more likely to be arrested than white children. Black youth represented less than 15% of the total youth population, but 52% of youth incarcerated in adult criminal facilities. Black youth are 9 times more likely than white youth to receive an adult prison sentence. In California, the story is similar. According to CDF's 2018 report, Unhidden Figures, Black youth are disproportionately enrolled in LA County schools that serve the students who are in the juvenile halls and probation camps. Although Black students are less likely to misbehave at school when compared to white students, they are 2 times as likely to receive school-based discipline. As a result of these systems, Black youth are significantly more likely to be homeless, to be jailed in the future, and to never achieve employment. Studies of traffic stops in California show a disturbingly similar pattern to those in Ferguson. While only 5% of white people who are searched during traffic stops, 24% of Black drivers and their passengers are searched, even though police are more likely to find drugs, weapons, or other contraband on white people than they are on anyone else. Driving home these connections in California, student Susan Burton's A New Way of Life published a study called Not Just a Ferguson Problem, How Traffic Courts Drive Inequality in California. This comprehensive report showed that 4 million people in California had their licenses suspended for similar reasons as we saw in Ferguson. The prosecution of these suspensions generated $10 billion in fines. As in Ferguson, these policies disproportionately impacted people of color, beginning with who gets pulled over in the first place. Data from San Diego and Sacramento showed that Black people were 2 to 4 times more likely to be pulled over for a traffic stop than white people. In San Francisco, over 70% of people seeking legal assistance for driver's license suspensions were African American, although African Americans make up only 6% of the city as a whole.
1 minute.
Data around police killings showed the same patterns. According to the Washington Post, police shot and killed at least 1,055 people nationwide last year. That's more than the 1,021 shootings in 2020 and 999 in 2019. Black people, who account for 13% of the population, accounted for 27% of those fatally shot and killed by police in 2021. In LA County alone, cops have killed 959 people since 2001, 233 of whom were Black. Although Black people make up less than 10% of LA County's population, they represented 24% of law enforcement killings. Conversely, white people, who make up more than a quarter of the population, are killed in 19% of the incidents. In summary, the legacy of enslavement is visible every day in our criminal legal system, throughout the country and in California. The harms of enslavement are not limited to the extraction of life and labor in the pre-Civil War period, but rather persist in ways that continue to today. These ongoing harms bleed over into other areas, including housing, employment, child welfare systems, houselessness, education, and the accumulation of intergenerational wealth. The remedy for such harms have to be comprehensive. When we were litigating against St. Louis's criminal legal system, we sought multiple victories: direct cash payments to people who survived the harm, massive systems change to end that harm in the future, and the creation of systems that we continue to offset these historical harms. Given the pervasive, ongoing nature of these harms, the people we represented, who have been experiencing intergenerational harm by these systems, knew that none of these incomes individually provided sufficient reparations. I hope the task force will consider this as it determines a slate of remedies to address these historic wrongs in California. Thank you very much.